If Lena Morrissey can't pick up a midnight call, maybe she's not cut out for national infrastructure. That's what Gavin Trent, the shiny new VP with a perfect smile and zero engineering background, said in front of HR. No emergency, no breach, just one missed call at 12:02 a.m. And it wasn't even about the system. It was a test, a loyalty trap. I'm Lena Morrissey, 56 lead systems architect at StratonGrid, and for 14 years I built Sentinel, our multi-layered self-healing grid system that keeps critical infrastructure from collapsing under attack. Every safeguard, every encrypted pulse, it was mine. For over a decade, I gave them everything. Missed birthdays, anniversaries, Thanksgivings, because this system mattered. But the moment I didn't answer one call, I was treated like a liability. I didn't ignore the call. I never heard it. I'd fallen asleep, my first real sleep, in 4 days after sitting in the ICU with my brother who'd just come out of emergency surgery. The moment he stabilized, I went back to the office. No excuse, just duty. I ran one final stress test until 10:30 p.m., verified the satellite handoff, and barely made it home. I passed out still wearing my shoes. When I woke at 6:11 a.m., there was no apology, no explanation, just an email stamped 5:59 a.m. You are hereby terminated. Failure to respond to an urgent after-hours escalation. I froze, then opened my laptop. I still had 24 hours of back-end access unless they cut it early. I checked the server logs and found a termination notice scheduled at 9:47 p.m. the night before, 2 hours before the call. It was never about the call. They planned to cut me out, and that call was just their paper trail. But what they didn't know, the system they tried to steal from me was already protecting itself. I had quietly embedded an autonomous lock protocol, one that would freeze Sentinel if a termination happened, without my biometric sign-off. The moment that HR email hit at 5:59 a.m., Sentinel went dark. They thought they fired me. But by 10:17 a.m., I held the keys to a system they couldn't touch. And that's the thing about trying to erase the woman who built your foundation. Sometimes she wrote herself into the source code. My thoughts drifted to Sentinel, the 17-layer encryption framework I spent nearly a decade building. I wondered if they were trying to run the demo without me. I wondered if anyone even knew about the last layer. I had written that final protocol in private, not for glory, for protection. But in that moment, I didn't feel clever. I didn't feel strong. I felt erased. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the Michigan Avenue streetlights flickered in the dawn. A man walked his dog. Somewhere, a delivery truck hissed to a stop. The world hadn't noticed I was gone, but Sentinel had. I built it to respond to certain triggers. One of them, termination without final sign-off. My laptop chimed, a ping from my personal Sentinel mirror. I opened the interface and froze. Freeze protocol executed, timestamp 5:59 a.m. The exact moment HR had fired me. I stared at the screen, watching the status bar blink a cold, calculated blue. For the first time since waking up, I exhaled. I hadn't just built a system. I'd built a safeguard. And while they were busy scrubbing my name from team rosters, they had no clue they'd triggered a silent shutdown. I knew, and now I held the key. Still, I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. Not from panic, not from anger, from grief. Because it wasn't just a job. They hadn't just fired me. They tried to erase me. The thing I gave everything to: long nights, missed birthdays, holidays spent debugging from hospital waiting rooms. They tried to claim it without me. I sank back into the chair. The ache ran deeper than this morning. It traced back through the years like spliced film unspooling. I remembered the unused sub-basement lab at StratonGrid HQ where Sentinel was born. A folding table, 3 whiteboards, a chair with 1 broken wheel. Nobody believed in the idea. Too ambitious. Too overbuilt. They didn't give me a team, so I stayed late. Alone. I remembered debugging the routing core on New Year's Eve while fireworks burst outside. I compiled the code for the 17th time. It failed, so I tried again. On my 43rd birthday, I had dinner reservations. But the authentication layer failed. No one else could fix it. I canceled. Again. Even when my brother coded blue on the operating table, I had my laptop in the ICU finalizing the fallback layer. Layer 17. They thought it was just another filter. It wasn't. It was the lock I built around the system's soul, a line no one could cross, not without me. And I never told them. Not to hide it, but because no one ever asked. He said layer 17 didn't serve a real-world function. That's when I knew. I smiled, nodded, and agreed to pull it from the final deployment roadmap. That night, I went home, rewrote it from scratch, encrypted every subroutine, and buried it in a mirror node protected by my private biometric key, hidden so deep they wouldn't even know it existed until they needed it. Until now. I glanced back at my screen, the diagnostic interface I'd spent years designing. Sentinel was still alive, quiet, stable. It hadn't rejected me. It remembered me. Every encrypted gate, every redundant lock, every line of defensive logic I built while the company paraded my system in boardrooms without ever inviting me into one. They thought I was replaceable, forgotten. But I had embedded my name in the only place that mattered in the code. Not in press releases, not in glossy slide decks, but in the foundation. And now, no matter how many directories they deleted or payrolls they revised, my system still knew who I was. I didn't move. I just stared at the quiet blue glow of the status log. Layer 17 freeze protocol. Active timestamp 5:59 a.m. The exact second HR terminated me. I pulled up my email again. Still 5:59 a.m. It wasn't coincidence. Sentinel hadn't guessed. It had responded precisely as designed. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't sabotage. This was engineering. Years ago, I'd built Layer 17 with 2 private triggers. 1, unjust termination. 2, no biometric sign-off from me on record. If both conditions were met, the system would lock. Not because I said so, because I planned for it. Not out of spite, out of survival. I knew what happened to women like me in tech, especially those who built something too valuable to ignore and too inconvenient to credit. So while my brother lay recovering from surgery, I sat beside him in the ICU writing the final clause into Layer 17. Just in case. And now the machine I'd spent a lifetime nurturing had made a decision on my behalf. Not emotional, just logical. They broke protocol. They skipped the process. And the system followed the rules I gave it. I opened the mirror node. Dozens of override attempts were already logged, most from internal IPs, some from elevated credentials. All had failed. I imagined the chaos engineers grappling with locked code. They didn't understand executives dialing into emergency briefings, trying to contain a system they thought they owned. But they never owned it. They just rented it from me. And I had quietly changed the locks. They didn't realize the system had stopped listening. Sentinel had gone quiet, but it wasn't broken. It was waiting. And me, I wasn't panicked. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't even angry. I just felt still. They thought cutting me loose would go unnoticed, that the foundation I built could function without its architect. What they didn't know was that buried beneath Sentinel's sleek UI and polished demos was a silent heartbeat, one that didn't ask permission to defend itself. And now that it had, I wasn't rushing to save them. I exported the freeze log, encrypted the file, and backed it up 3 ways: 2 cloud copies and 1 offline drive. Folder name, fail-safe status confirmed. Then I sat back and let them panic. They made the first move in secret. I wouldn't return the favor. My silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Control was never something I had to chase. I already had it. They just hadn't figured that out yet. At 9:30 a.m., Gavin Trent, VP of Strategic Systems, adjusted his cufflinks and stepped into StratonGrid's high-gloss briefing suite. The room gleamed with white leather chairs and an LED wall 12 feet wide. 4 federal reps sat waiting, composed and cautious. Cameras stood ready to capture Gavin's perfect posture. If this moment moved you even a little, hit subscribe, not just for this story, but for the next chapter, where quiet strength becomes unstoppable momentum. Gentlemen, He smiled today, you'll see the future of autonomous grid intelligence. But what they didn't see were the frantic alerts on Gavin's private terminal UI failed to load full framework. Layer 17 unresponsive. Backup node silent. Authorization missing. Delay 1 tech messaged. Patch it. Use last stable build. Go live in 15, Gavin typed back. Behind the LED wall, 2 engineers stared at frozen diagnostics. One thin red line glared across the top of the console. Authorization layer missing. Gavin didn't notice yet. He nodded to the AV tech, stepped to the podium, and launched into the script. In any high-risk scenario, Sentinel adapts in real time. Back in my apartment, I refreshed the mirror node. Sentinel was stable, online. But layer 17 still locked. Authorization missing override attempts 3. Failed. They were trying and failing. Gavin's voice carried through the live stream with polished ease. Now we'll demonstrate a live failover. A technician leaned in. Gavin didn't flinch, but his voice dipped. In the control room, panic was rising. Biometric signature not found. Access denied. Timeout error. Try the override again. Someone hissed. Which one? All of them. Then his voice low. Gavin asked, did we get Lena's token before she left? Silence. No, he snapped. Then spoof it. We can't, the lead engineer said. Layer 17 needs her real biometric key. Another override failed this time from Gavin's own admin ID. 9:57 a.m. Logged, denied. Then my phone buzzed. Logan Kim, one of my old engineers. They're spiraling. Gavin's blaming you. Want to talk? I didn't answer. Because the system was already speaking for me. Logan's message flashed on my phone. Demo stuck. Gavin's blaming you. Want to talk? I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. Instead, I opened the Sentinel command queue. On the surface, everything looked calm. But beneath, a tidal wave of blocked access and failed override attempts rippled through the mirror logs. Inside the boardroom, one of the federal reps finally spoke. Are we seeing a live system today, or just the highlights? Gavin's jaw tightened. His smile strained. He glanced to his lead tech, who gave the slightest shake of his head. The interface is locked, sir. Why, it's internal. A security protocol. That word internal landed like a confession. For the first time, Gavin realized he was presenting something he didn't understand or control. Then came 10:17 a.m. A hush passed through the room like a breeze across glass. On the towering LED screen, Sentinel's animated interface vanished, replaced by a single cold line of text on a matte gray background. Authorization incomplete signature, missing no flashing alert. No dramatic failure sound. Just silence. Clinical. Precise. Absolute. Gavin froze, tilted his head. That's, one of our secondary verification screens. He offered weakly. It should clear in just a moment. But no one moved. A defense contractor leaned forward. Another tapped a pen against the table. Quiet, pointed judgment. In the control room, a junior engineer stared at the frozen screen. It's not clearing, he muttered. System stuck in authorization check. What's it looking for? The tech lead snapped. The junior scrolled quickly. Biometric token, layer 17, says signature missing. Whose signature? I don't know. It doesn't say. Override it. We already tried 3 times. Try again. Gavin's earpiece crackled. He turned slightly. Talk to me. A voice replied, low and strained. Systems locked at layer 17. It's requesting a biometric signature. Whose? We think it's Lena's. You think she never submitted the final token. You're telling me no one can get past this screen, no one authorized. He exhaled slowly, turned back to the room. We're just recalibrating a security layer. These protocols are designed to over-defend. No one laughed. At home, I watched it all unfold from my laptop. The same screen lit up across both systems. I'd written that message nearly 2 years ago. Neutral, unhackable, deliberate. Sentinel wasn't crashing. It was waiting. For me. The log showed override 4, 9, 5:57 a.m. Denied. Override. 5:10:02 a.m. Denied. Fail safe. Triggered. 10:17 a.m. They were flailing, but they didn't even know what they were missing. Someone in the tech room finally whispered it. So, she's the only one who can unlock it. The silence afterward told me everything. I saw the next email hit. Urgent signature, confirmation request. Then another. Then a call. I didn't answer. The system was doing exactly what I'd built it to do, and I didn't need to say a word. Now, they were finally learning what it meant to build a system around one person and then try to erase her. I closed the mirror node and stood. The boardroom screen behind Gavin Trent still displayed the same frozen message, authorization incomplete signature. Missing it hadn't blinked. It hadn't changed. It wasn't going away. And I had no intention of returning my name to the system. Not yet. I leaned back, arms crossed, watching the quiet hum of the mirror interface. I didn't need to monitor the logs anymore. There was nothing left to prove. They'd locked themselves out. I just happened to hold the key. I reached for my coffee. Cold again. Didn't matter. That message wasn't just a technical warning, it was a statement. They thought they owned everything. But they never had me. At 10:17 a.m., Sentinel spoke in my place. Because I wasn't in the room to speak for myself. And I didn't need to be. Still, the memories came sharp as ever. Year 3. Our first big investor pitch. I had written every line of Sentinel's routing engine by hand, debugged it until dawn. But when the slide deck was shown, the lead name wasn't mine. It was a marketing director who'd never touched a keyboard. Afterward, I quietly asked Gavin if it was an oversight. He just smiled. You're the genius behind the curtain, Lena. We needed a cleaner face up front. I nodded. That's what I did back then. Nod. Keep working. A year later, we hosted a military demo. I offered to lead especially the redirect protocol I'd spent months fine-tuning. Gavin gave the spotlight to Tyler. He presents well. Tyler botched the terminology, misrepresented the system entirely. I sat backstage fixing live logs while he answered questions from a sheet I had written. Eventually, even the team stopped mentioning me. I became legacy logic. Not architect, not origin, but the clearest memory that was 2 months ago. Legal handed me a thick folder of transfer documents. Full IP reassignment, every layer, every line under company ownership. I reviewed it twice. One clause stood out, sweeping rights to all architecture, vaguely worded. I asked about layer 17. It's implied, the legal rep said. We own the whole tree. Then write it out, I told him. They didn't. I didn't sign. And I never submitted the final biometric token. Layer 17 stayed off record, off diagrams, and out of reach. They assumed I'd fold like I always had. They were wrong. I glanced back at the mirror node. Layer 17, locked authorization, pending owner, validation. Lena Morrissey. I laughed dry. Quiet, more breath than sound. They thought they could erase me. But my name was already written in the only place that mattered. I muted the phone. By the 4th call, I flipped it face down on the kitchen table. The silent vibrations crawled across the wood like desperation dressed in corporate polish. I didn't answer. Not Gavin, not legal, not the executive assistant who once asked me to order lunch for a meeting I wasn't invited to, even though I had architected the very system they were discussing. At 10:20 a.m., I poured myself another cup of cold coffee. I imagined Gavin pacing somewhere in a corner office, voice cracking into a Bluetooth headset. The irony, he didn't know the command hierarchy. Couldn't tell the difference between Sentinel's control shell and the dynamic routing layer, but he sure knew how to fire someone efficiently, publicly, and without ceremony. Now his big federal demo had blinked out at 10:17 a.m., shut down by the system he never understood. They launched it without me. No biometric handshake, no access to layer 17. Encrypted, buried, mine. They assumed I was done. Replaceable. But Sentinel had already made its decision. By 10:24, another name flashed on my screen. Colin Alvarez. I hadn't heard from Colin in nearly 4 years. He was a junior engineer back when I was lead architect, quiet, loyal, brilliant. I once sat with him for 32 hours straight while his son fought through a medical crisis, walking him through diagnostics between ICU updates. His message read, "You stayed 32 hours for me when my son was in ICU. You're not alone." I sat still. Breathing was harder than it should have been. I'd been holding so much rage, I'd forgotten there was grief beneath it. And below that, something warmer. Trust. Before I could reply, another message appeared. "I'm consulting with Lucent Partners now. Heads up, we own 12% of StratonGrid. They don't know I'm looped into this." Lucent. The firm Gavin had been chasing for months. The same one that had quietly walked away from 3 separate meetings. Colin was already on the inside. I stepped outside into the sunlight. The breeze didn't ask for loyalty, or late-night logins, or silence. For the first time in weeks, I felt the sun on my skin without guilt. I sat on the bench outside my building. The city hummed around me, oblivious to the quiet war unfolding in boardrooms and inboxes. I remembered Clause 17(3), the one I wrote, the one they skimmed. No party shall simulate present or deploy the Sentinel framework without dual authentication from its originating architect. They thought it was just paperwork, but I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for the record. 3 more messages arrived. An intern, a data scientist, a defense advisor, each with the same message we remember. Let them call. Let them scramble. I stood, brushed off my coat sleeves, and walked back inside. This next step wasn't about proving anything. It was about correcting the record. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reminding them that integrity doesn't sleep, and neither does memory. I let them spiral. Let the silence stretch. The screen still glowed with a message from Jules. "They're asking for a call. Now. Gavin's in full damage control." I didn't move, just stared at the blinking cursor in the empty email I'd opened hours earlier. No adrenaline, no panic, just clarity. I pulled up the contract again. Clause 6(14), termination. Without formal written process, voids all technology transfer. Exclusive code rights revert to the original creator. Biometric access too. I didn't write the clause, but I'd fought to keep it in. The blinds cut slats of morning light across my kitchen floor. I hadn't slept, but I felt still. Anchored. Focused. At 8:49 a.m., I typed 3 lines, "System is stable." Clause 6.14 applies. Available for formal dialogue. No greeting, no emotion, just their words reflected back at them. I hit send. 10 minutes passed, then 15. No reply. Didn't matter. Somewhere inside StratonGrid's boardroom, Gavin was pacing. Legal teams were combing archived PDFs, trying to decode what Clause 6.14 meant and how much damage it could cause. They expected desperation. Instead, I handed them consequences. I opened the Sentinel licensing dashboard in a new tab. Layer 17 still locked. Every core protocol beneath it blinking red. Inaccessible. They couldn't touch the foundation. Never could. A new notification came through an internal leak. A string of messages forwarded anonymously. Most were technical flailing, but one line stood out. "She's not asking for money. She's asking for acknowledgement." That's when the panic softened into confusion. They were prepared for a price tag, an ultimatum. But what I wanted was simpler, more dangerous. I didn't want their settlement check. I wanted their truth written plainly. A public letter signed by the board confirming that Sentinel's core encryption, including Layer 17, was authored, owned, and protected by Lena Morrissey. No edits, no PR team spin. Just the truth. I closed my laptop. The sunlight had shifted again. I walked barefoot to the kitchen, poured coffee, and sipped slowly. No more late-night urgent pings. No more being erased from my own system. They thought they owned what I built, but they couldn't replicate me. By the time the first financial alert pinged, I was slicing apples in my mother's kitchen. 10:03 a.m. StratonGrid down 6.2%. 10:15, contract breach warning. 10:18, CEO unavailable for comment. My mother looked at me with quiet pride in her tired eyes. I said nothing. I didn't need to. At 10:23, Gavin's name flashed again. Still not calling back. One of the investors moved first. Not just any investor, Calder Birchman. The same man who sat across from me 2 years ago during that rainy strategy session, watching me live trigger Sentinel's stress response engine with a single voice command. His press release was just 28 words. StratonGrid's recent actions have caused material concern. We are divesting effective immediately. Our commitment was to the architect, and she is no longer there. It detonated like a chain reaction. By 11:27 a.m., StratonGrid shares dropped 11.8%. By 12:44, they were down 18%, a red slope slicing across every trading terminal. I didn't need to refresh the feed. I already knew the math. The Department of Defense pulled them from consideration. An EU defense partner suspended its pilot review. That $1.3 billion contract on indefinite hold. But it wasn't the numbers that mattered. It was the silence, the way the same executives who once CC'd me on things I built, who redirected credit to men in better suits, were now gasping because I stopped showing up. I poured tea. My hands were steady. No vengeance in my chest. Just calm. At 12:58 p.m., my inbox pinged. Not Gavin, not legal. Naomi Calder's advisor. They'll offer equity. Ignore it. Calder would like a private conversation. I barely smiled. Not out of satisfaction, but because for once, I didn't have to fight to be seen. Recognition had arrived, fully formed, earned across decades of late nights, missed holidays, and quiet excellence. StratonGrid thought they'd locked me out. In truth, they had locked themselves in. By 1:05 p.m., the media had a new name trending. Not Gavin, not the board. Lena Morrissey, architect, creator, owner of the signature that never came. That same hour, I entered the executive conference room. 2 minutes early, no introductions. They knew who I was now. "We're here to find a solution," said one partner, his voice tight. "The market reaction is 18%. I leaned forward. "I'm open to a solution, but it won't be money, and it won't be silence." That made Damien finally look up. His face had changed. Less bravado, more reckoning. I reached into my bag and slid a single page across the table, clause 614 highlighted. "System is stable," I said evenly. "Clause 614 applies." "I'm available for formal dialogue," Gavin scoffed. "You're invoking that over a procedural oversight?" I didn't answer. Their lawyer cleared his throat. "We were told Layer 17 was company property." I met his eyes. "You were told wrong." I slid a second document forward, an LLC registration under my mother's name. IP rights. Independently funded. 2 years ago. "You registered this while still employed here?" Damien asked. I nodded calm. "Yes, and I disclosed it. You just didn't think I'd follow through." They went quiet. The only sound was the tick of the wall clock now, loud marking every second their leverage slipped away. I leaned in. "You have 2 options," I said calmly. "Option 1, we enter formal negotiations. I'll unlock the system under clear terms, a public admission of authorship correction of internal records, proper attribution. No money, just truth." Damien didn't ask what option 2 was, but I told him anyway. "The system deactivates in 48 hours, permanently. No restart, no PR strategy clean enough to explain it." Blaine's voice cracked. "You tank everything just for recognition. I didn't blink. I'm not tanking anything. I'm restoring what was never yours." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Damien exhaled and nodded. "We'll draft something." "I expect it by 9 a.m., I replied. The meeting ended. I walked out without a smile, but something inside me had shifted. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. At 8:30 the next morning, the call started. Not Blaine, not legal. External counsel trying to sound composed. I let it go to voicemail. By 9:15, the final document was signed, not theirs. Mine. Filed under Lena Morrissey, LLC, the company I'd quietly built and named after my mother, the one they never saw coming. By 10:00 a.m., I stepped through the doors of a quiet innovation lab in Vermont. No giant logo, no politics. Just engineers building with care. The CEO greeted me with a nod. "You've done enough proving, Lena. We're here to protect what others tried to erase." I handed over layer 17 sealed with my full biometric signature. This time, the screen glowed, "Green access granted. Owner verified." At 11:12 a.m., I toured the dev floor. Not as a visitor, not as a contractor. On the clearance sheet, I was listed as Chief Architect Lena Morrissey. At 12:25 p.m., they rolled in a brushed steel plaque. Simple. Bold. Chief Architect Lena Morrissey. We protect the people who build the system. Not a thank you, not a trophy. Just the truth. By 1:00 p.m., Blaine emailed. Subject apology and resolution proposal. I deleted it without opening. Not out of spite, out of peace. At 1:08 p.m., a junior engineer tapped on my door. "Did you really embed a live audit trail in the heartbeat layer?" I smiled. I did. 8 years ago. Her eyes lit up. Like I'd bent time. Maybe I had. They took my job. My title. But I took back something deeper. My name. And this time, it stood alone. If you've ever been told to stay quiet and be grateful, I hope my story reminds you that your work is not invisible, and neither are you. I didn't burn bridges. I simply refused to let others walk across mine like it never existed. If this resonated with you, leave a comment below. Tell me what you would have done in my place. Or share the moment you finally stood up for yourself. I'll be reading. And to those still waiting for their moment, protect your value, even if no one else does. Integrity is quiet, but it echoes. Support stories like mine by giving this video a like, share it with someone who needs courage today, and subscribe if you believe people who build the foundation deserve more than footnotes. Together, let's make sure the ones who stay late, think deeply, and build boldly never get erased again.